Good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can see the screen. So we are with chapter number 35, okay, which is magnetic properties of materials. And I started this chapter in the last class. We started off with a recall of chapter number 29, which is the electrical properties of materials. And I have tried to show you how there are so many parallels between electrical properties of materials and magnetic properties of materials. Therefore, to make this academic exercise interesting, you need to compare the two at every stage. And when you do that, learning becomes easier. So we went through everything that was there in chapter number 29. And after we were done with that, we started off with a definition of what is a magnetic dipole. And then what's a unit of magnetic dipole. Then we went to the magnetic dipole as a source of magnetic field. We found out what is the expression for the magnetic field due to a loop of current or a magnetic dipole. And because it's a magnetic dipole, R is much, much less than Z. So as a consequence, you found that the magnetic field due to a magnetic dipole is falling off as 1 by Z cube. It falls off with the cube of the distance. Then we went to see what happens to a dipole when it is placed in an external magnetic field. First, we took a uniform external magnetic field, and from our chapter number 32, we know that a dipole in an uniform external magnetic field experiences zero net force. But then you saw that there will be a torque, tau is equal to mu cross B, acting on this dipole, and the job of this torque is to orient the dipole moment parallel to the magnetic field. And once we were done with that, we talked about... Yeah?
Ma'am, we are not able to see the PPT.
Oh, I'm sorry. 1 second. Can you see it now?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So we started, I'm recording, right? Yeah. So we started seeing that, the magnetic dipole moment is actually a source of magnetic field. We saw how the magnetic field falls off as cube of the distance. Then after that, we have seen that dipole is affected by an external magnetic field. Okay, and we have seen that it will experience a torque so that the dipole moment is parallel to the externally applied uniform magnetic field. Then at this point, we also said that magnetic force itself is a non-conservative force. It's a non-conservative force, but then you can talk about a system consisting of the magnetic dipole in an external magnetic field. Now, this consists of a system which is conservative. We call it a conservative system simply because the behavior of the system depends on the configuration, meaning the behavior of the system is going to be dependent on the angle between the dipole moment and the magnetic field. And whenever a system is going to be configuration dependent, we say that it can be treated as a conservative system, and you can talk about a potential energy. So the potential energy was defined as minus mu dot B. Then from here we found that the potential energy is the minimum and negative when the dipole is parallel to the magnetic field, which is the most stable situation. And when it is anti-parallel, it has got the highest energy. Highest potential energy is also equilibrium, but unstable equilibrium. And from this equation, U equal to minus mu dot B, we arrived at another unit of magnetic moment. Magnetic moment, one unit that we know is ampere meter square. But now we know that we can just say potential energy is joule, so joule per Tesla is also another unit. Then of course we can talk about work done and changing configuration, because after all work done is negative of changing potential energy. Then after that we went to where do you see dipoles in nature? We saw that yes, there are dipoles within the atom. You can talk about the net dipole moment of the atom also, where that net dipole moment is simply the vector sum of the dipole moments due to the spin of the electrons, orbital motion of the electrons, the spin of the nucleus, etc. And then we found that the nuclear dipole moment contributes very, very little to the magnetic property of a material, because it is 10 to the power of 3 to 10 to the power of 6 times smaller than the entire atom's dipole moment. Then after that, we wanted to describe ferromagnetism and paramagnetism using this concept. So we went straight to a non-uniform magnetic field. Okay, the loop 1 was the source of the magnetic field. Obviously, near the loop 1, there is higher magnetic field. Away from loop 1, the magnetic field is less. So into this loop, into this magnetic field, you put a loop 2 so that it is oriented parallel to loop 1. There are currents I1 and I2 which are parallel. And when you move loop 1 towards loop 2, obviously the magnetic flux through the loop 2 is increasing. Therefore, according to Faraday's and Lenz's law, there will be an what happens is there is going to be a sorry. Here I'm just getting confused. So loop 1 is not moving with respect to loop 2. Loop 1 and loop 2 are actually permanent dipoles. And you can see that loop 1 can be treated as a bar magnet with north up. Similarly, loop 2 can be treated as a bar magnet with the north pole up. So this you are doing from the right hand rule. Turn your fingers in the direction of the current and look at the direction of the thumb. So you can see that there are two bar magnets. These two loops behave like two bar magnets with opposite poles close up to each other. So obviously there is going to be an attraction. There's going to be an attraction. And even using the concept of F is equal to IL cross B also, we can show that we can take two diametrically opposite elements and then show that the net force is in the downward direction. So it is an attractive force. And we have seen all this can be summed up as one sentence, which says that in a non-uniform magnetic field, permanent dipoles means materials where there is a permanent current, like in loop 2, they are rotated into alignment with the field and attracted towards the source of the field. What is the source of the field here? Source of the field is loop 1. So loop 2 is getting attracted towards it. Now this sentence, in short, talks about how paramagnetic and ferromagnetic materials behave. If you look at their atoms, they have permanent dipoles. And the minute you bring an external magnetic field near them, they get attracted towards the magnet. And they get attracted because there is an orientation first and then there is an attraction. Then from here, we proceeded to understand what is diamagnetism. And please remember, in diamagnets, there is no permanent dipole. Net dipole of the atom is 0. The net dipole of the atom will be 0. First thing is because every electron is going to have a parallel electron. Okay, so pairs of electrons with opposite spins will be there. So spin moment will be 0. Then of course the orbital also, what happens is, the vector sums will somehow add up to be 0. So the net dipole moment of an atom will be 0 in the absence of an external field. Therefore, typically, let us say an atom of bismuth can be represented like this, like two coils, which are two loops which are having equal and opposite current. So one loop gives magnetic field in the downward, mu in the downward direction, the other one in the upward direction. The sum is 0. This is when there is no external magnetic field. Now let's apply a magnetic field and move the magnet close to the loop. When you move it with a velocity v, you're finding that the flux through the loop will increase. Therefore, there will be induced currents. But the induced currents will be the same direction for both these loops. The induced current will be the same direction for both of them. Therefore, if you try to see what is going to be the induced magnetic field, the induced magnetic field will be in the downward direction. Or in other words, now because of the induced magnetic field, the loops now behave like a bar magnet with the north down. And look at this, a north and a north close to each other means there is a repulsion. So this is how you can explain diamagnetism. Or summing it as a sentence, in a non-uniform magnetic field, induced dipoles get repelled from the source of the field. The source is the bar magnet. The dipole, which is initially not having any dipole moment, are the pair of loops. Then there is an induced dipole and it is getting repelled from the source of the magnetic field. Okay, now with all this in mind, let us now look at, if you were to look at any material, okay, let's say we are talking about a paramagnetic material. A paramagnetic material is simply going to be a collection of magnetic dipole moments. A dipole moment, by now you know that a loop of current will behave like a bar magnet. Okay, so instead of showing loops, he's showing tiny bar magnets. Each atom behaves like a tiny bar magnet, but you can see that they are randomly oriented. They are randomly oriented when you don't apply a magnetic field. But then when you apply a magnetic field, you're finding that there are more number of north poles on the right hand side of the figure. More number of north poles on the right hand side of the figure, or there is an alignment. Initially, because they were all randomly oriented, if you take a block of the paramagnetic material, the net magnetization will be 0. The net magnetic dipole will be 0. Though each atom is having its own dipole, but because they are all randomly oriented, vector sum is 0. But the minute you apply a magnetic field, there is a orientation. At least a little orientation you are able to see. So because of this orientation, there is more north on the right hand side of the picture and south on the left hand side of the picture. Or you can talk about a net dipole moment. Okay, so microscopically, each of these little bar magnets are actually loops of currents. Okay, and this also explains how you cannot have isolated magnetic monopoles. A loop of current is like a tiny bar magnet, north-south pole. So a loop of current cannot be split so that there is a separate north pole and a separate south pole. That's the reason why we say that magnetic monopoles do not exist. Now here is a question. What about ferromagnetics and diamagnetics? If you were to draw such a picture for ferromagnetic, you will draw a picture like what is given at the top, even without magnetic field. Even without applied magnetic field, there will be some order. Okay, so there will be some magnetization or net dipole moment even without magnetic field for ferromagnets. When you apply a magnetic field, lot of order will be there. Lot of order will be there. So you get a large net dipole moment. What happens in the case of diamagnets? If you have to draw a similar picture for diamagnets, you will initially show no tiny magnets. Every atom is in such a way that the net dipole moment is 0. So they are all going to be like this. Now, if you're going to see what happens when you apply a magnetic field, let's say you're going to apply a magnetic field like this. And if you're going to talk about diamagnets, you're going to find that the picture is going to be opposite of what is given at the top. The picture will be opposite of what is given at the top. You're going to find north here, south here, north here, south here. Or there is going to be a repulsion. And when you first draw a picture without magnetic field, there is no dipole at all. Okay, now, even without my knowledge, I used a term magnetization 2 times in this last 10 minutes. I've used a term magnetization 2 times in the last few minutes without even explaining to you what is magnetization. Okay, that is like muscle memory for me because we've been teaching this course, it automatically comes. So now let us see what is this magnetization. We're going to define what is magnetization. Okay. So if I take a block of material, of volume V, please remember there are number of dipoles. Dipoles which may be in different directions or same direction, whatever. You can find the net dipole moment. I have one dipole. This is ith dipole. Similarly, you add up everything, I get net dipole moment. And then what I do is I'll call this as vector mu. Vector mu is sum of all the dipoles, vector sum of all the dipole moments present inside that block of material. Now we define magnetization. Magnetization is going to be this mu divided by the volume. The net dipole moment per unit volume. Okay, the net dipole moment per unit volume. I once more explain. Okay, so please remember a block of material is made up of a number of dipoles. You can find the net dipole moment. The net dipole moment is called the mu vector. Now, V is the volume of this block. if I divide mu by V, then what I get is the magnetization. And this magnetization, as you can see, is a vector parallel to magnetization vector is a vector parallel to the mu vector. What is mu? Mu is the net dipole moment. Okay, with this definition, let us go to this first picture. Here I have a solenoid through which there is a current. From the picture, you can see the right-hand rule you can use and show that there is a uniform magnetic field B naught inside the solenoid. Okay. Now what we are going to do is we are going to take a solid cylinder so that it will fill up the space. We'll take a solid cylinder and fill up the space. Solid cylinder, not a hollow cylinder. Okay. So solid cylinder, a piece of material that is in the shape of a cylinder, and then it should fill up this solenoid volume. Okay. So now what will happen? Let us see. What will happen is there will be initially, if I just take that block of material initially, the dipoles may be there, may not be there, may be disoriented, may not be disoriented, whatever. It may be paramagnetic, diamagnetic, ferromagnetic, whatever. Let us say it is paramagnetic or ferromagnetic. So take this and put it inside. When you put it inside, what happens? There is a torque acting on all these dipoles, and all these little dipoles will start orienting parallel to the magnetic field. All of them will start orienting parallel to the magnetic field. Okay. Now, what happens as a result of this is the magnetic field inside was initially B naught, but now it is taking a new value B. It is going to take a new value B. Okay. And what is the relationship between B, B naught, and the magnetization? Please remember why this net B has changed. The B inside is now no longer B naught. It has taken a new value B. That happened because of magnetization happening. The dipole started orienting, so there is a net magnetization. And if you look at the unit of B, magnetic field is Tesla, okay, but M is going to not have the unit of Tesla, okay. Therefore, I will now define a quantity called the magnetic field because of magnetization. The magnetic field because of magnetization. Please remember, first there is only one solenoid, but now there are tiny magnets and they are all aligning. So each of them will give their own magnetic field. This magnetic field is called the magnetization field. This magnetization field is related to the magnetic field by the equation mu naught into M. So this field that you're getting is because of magnetization, and it is related to the magnetization by the equation Bm equal to mu naught into M. M is magnetization, Bm is the field due to magnetization. Okay. Now you see what will be this net B. Net B will be sum of the applied field and the magnetization field. So there are two fields now inside the solenoid. One because of the solenoid itself, the current in the solenoid, that is B naught. And the second is because the material got magnetized, it also contributes to the magnetic field. And that field is called Bm. So the net field is applied field B naught plus the magnetization field B. Okay? So this is how you can actually use suitable materials inside a solenoid and increase the magnetic field that a solenoid can produce. Now I want you to just go back to some chapters that we have seen in the past where you had a magnetic core, ferromagnetic material. Like for example, in the transformer, we had a ferromagnetic material. The job of the ferromagnetic material is to increase the net magnetic field that a solenoid can give. Just with air, it will give a field B naught. Okay, but then if you have a material, ferromagnetic material, that ferromagnetic material will magnetize and give its own magnetic field. The applied magnetic field plus this magnetic field will add up and give you a large magnetic field. Okay, now, just now I gave you a relationship between the magnetic field, the field due to magnetization, and the magnetization vector. I gave you this equation. Similarly, you can write an equation connecting the net field and the applied field. The net field and the applied field. What is the relationship? The relationship is B is equal to kappa M into B naught. B equal to kappa M into B naught. B naught is applied field, B is the net field. Now this kappa M is called permeability of the medium. It's called the permeability of the medium. Okay. You have seen something like this in electrostatics also. In electrostatics, what you have seen is you had a block of material, a block of a dielectric. You applied a uniform field E naught. Then there was a magnetization, there was a dipole, electric dipole orientation. So this polarization field that you got was E prime. Then as a result, you had a lesser field inside the material, or E was equal to E naught plus vector E. Okay, or if you remove the vector sign, it was E equal to E naught minus E prime. Okay, there also you had kappa E. Kappa E was, you had an equation for kappa E. Anyone can tell me? Anyone? Kappa E was applied field divided by the net field. And in the case of electrostatics, you always had E less than E naught. Okay? But coming to magnetization, see, if you make these comparisons, no, learning will be easy. Okay, so now what we'll do is, let us just, in the equation, B equal to B naught plus mu naught M, let us make substitutions. You get kappa M into B naught plus B naught equal to mu naught into M. Okay, or you will be able to get an equation for kappa M minus 1. You get kappa M minus 1 equal to mu naught M by B naught. Mu naught M by B naught. Now, this kappa M minus 1 has a lot of significance. If kappa M minus 1 is very, very small, that is, if kappa M is very, very close to 1, then the material has not made any effect to your applied magnetic field. It has not made any effect to your applied magnetic field. Kappa M minus 1 is 10 to the power of minus 3 to 10 to the power of minus 6 means the material is non-ferromagnetic. It has not contributed to the magnetism at all. The applied field B naught is the field even after you put the material inside. If on the other hand, if it is ferromagnetic, you will get even up to 2000 times the magnetic field will increase. That's the picture given here. Look at this A. In A, each is a permanent dipole but randomly oriented. The minute you apply a magnetic field, these dipoles get oriented. They set up a magnetization. They set up a magnetization field BM. B naught and BM are parallel. They add up and give you a big field. Okay, now the question is, what happens if it is diamagnetic? In diamagnetic, what happens is when you apply a field, the dipoles will be formed but then in opposite direction. So the net field inside will decrease. So whenever you want to create a big field, go for a ferromagnetic material. Kappa M is large. Iron is a typical example of a ferromagnetic material. Let's just look at this problem. The magnetic field in the interior of a solenoid has a value 6.5 into 10 to the power of minus 4 Tesla. Okay, so what is this? This is actually B naught. B naught equal to 6.5 into 10 to the power of minus 4 Tesla. This is when the solenoid is empty. That's why we say it is B naught. Then you fill it with iron. Iron, you know, is ferromagnetic. The field now becomes 1.4 Tesla. You can see how much it has grown. It has become 1.4 Tesla. Now, find the relative permeability. Find the relative permeability. For relative permeability, you have this equation. Kappa M is equal to B by B naught. This is the straight relationship between B and B naught. Like how you had kappa E equal to E naught by E, reverse. Similarly here, kappa M is B by B naught. You have B, you have B naught. You can see the value of kappa M. I told you, ferromagnetic materials will have large value of kappa. So kappa M minus 1 also is nearly that only. Okay? Yeah, so that's the first part of the problem. Second, find the average magnetic moment of an iron atom. Find the average magnetic moment of an iron atom under these conditions. Okay? So first of all, what we need to do is we have to use the equation B is equal to B naught plus mu naught M. Okay? And try to get your magnetization vector. Get your magnetization. So what is magnetization? B minus B naught by mu naught. Mu naught is 4 pi into 10 to the power of minus 7. B and B naught we already used previously. So you're going to get 1.11 into 10 to the power of 6 ampere per meter. Ampere per meter. Okay, that's a unit of magnetization. Can someone tell me how this ampere per meter came? For magnetization, how the unit ampere per meter came? Anyone? What is magnetization? Net dipole moment divided by volume. What is the unit of magnetic moment? It was ampere meter square. Divided by volume is meter cube. So you get ampere per meter. You don't have to mug up, it's just common sense. Okay, so magnetization will be 1.11 into 10 to the power of 6 ampere per meter. Very large magnetization. Now, this is because of all the atoms in 1 meter cube of the iron block. Now, you have to find out the average magnetic moment of one single atom. Okay, so what you have to do is find out how many atoms are there in 1 meter cube of iron. So this is a formula that we have used in chapter 29. When we used J is equal to NeVd, we found out N. N is the number of carriers in 1 meter cube of the material. And there we took copper contributes 1 electron per atom. So we found out the number of atoms, and from that we got the number of electrons. But here we want the number of atoms. So you can use the same formula. Okay, mass by volume into atoms by mass. Okay, is atoms per volume. So using the same formula, you will get rho into Avogadro number divided by the molar mass. Okay, so from here you're getting your N value. It has to be 10 to the power of 28. It has to be 10 to the power of 28 because I told you for any conductor, the carrier concentration is 10 to the power of 28. Therefore, the number of atoms also should be of the same order. So the number is 8.49 into 10 to the power of 28 atoms per meter cube. Number of atoms in 1 meter cube. So now you know what is magnetization. Magnetization is the total dipole moment in 1 meter cube of the material. Or you can say that if there are n atoms and if mu is the magnetic moment of, I will put average here. If mu average is the magnetic moment of one atom, then n into mu average is magnetization. Therefore, you can get your mu average. So mu average will be net magnetization divided by the number of atoms. Okay, needless to tell you, the unit will be Joule per Tesla. Now finally, just a minute, I'll finish this chapter. So we have to finally see Gauss law for magnetism. For electrostatics, you know Gauss law. It is phi E equal to integral E dot dA equal to Q by epsilon naught. Okay. Similarly, when you write an equation for magnetism Gauss law, you will get the right hand side 0. You get right hand side 0 because For the Gaussian surface, the number of field lines entering will be the same as the number of field lines exiting. That is because magnetic monopoles do not exist. Every line starting has to end in itself. Magnetic field lines always form closed loops. So if I take some Gaussian surface like this, I find a certain number of lines cutting out. That will be equal to the number of lines cutting in. Therefore, the right-hand side has to be 0. This is what we have been telling from the last 2 classes. Then another very important thing is, why can't I take a magnet and cut it into pieces? I will get a north pole and south pole separately. No, that also will not happen. When you cut it, there will be 2 magnets formed. That is a north and a south, and north and a south. So isolated magnetic monopoles are not possible. And then of course, this is a very, very famous figure. He is just trying to show you that in magnetism, if you draw any Gaussian surface, the number of field lines exiting is the same as field lines entering. Therefore, the flux is 0. So if it is true for a bar magnet, it is true for a solenoid also. So what he is doing here is, he is drawing such a picture for a bar magnet, and then he is doing such a picture for a solenoid also. After all, both of them are the same. A solenoid and a bar magnet have identical magnetic field distribution. Therefore, you're not going to get any different for both these sources. So with this, we are winding up this particular chapter. Now, I want to give you people a choice. I need 4 more classes to finish the syllabus. 4 more classes to finish the syllabus. 2 for one chapter, 2 for another chapter. That is 36 and 38. If you come for one special class on Tuesday, by next Friday, I can finish the syllabus and keep you free for the last week for all your other submissions and preparation for the exam. Would you want that?
Okay.
Only one person is saying that, Balanaveen.
Yes, ma'am.
How is the syllabus going for the other subjects? How is it going for other subjects? Huh? Have you finished the syllabus for any subject? Is the syllabus completed for any subject?
Not yet.
Not yet. So it will, when will it all get over? I'm trying to help you and you're not even answering. See, the thing is, are all the components of evaluation over for all the subjects?
No, ma'am.
For physics, is it over?
Yes, ma'am.
For physics lab, is it over?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So this is what we always do. We are known to be a tough department, but then we are tough only when it comes to discipline. But when it comes to these kind of things, we always worry for the students. We don't want to have any last minute tensions for the students. So we are trying to cope up and finish it fast. So if you people can give me one extra class on Tuesday, I will quickly finish the syllabus so that you can sit and start preparing for your exam. So please, all of you, it's already put on the internet, on the LMS, your pre-compre marks are given to you. So look at that. I think there are some students who have to write makeup for test 2, except theirs. Everybody else's marks are already there. Please go through the marks and you know where you stand in the marks. And then looking at that, you start preparing for your end semester. That is one thing. Next thing is regarding lab also. Have you seen your lab marks? Physics lab marks?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. So for 8 experiments, please, I just want to explain how the calculation is done. For every experiment, it is 25 marks. For 8 experiments, you have been graded. Okay. The marks are good. We have been very liberal, very liberal. If you were coming to the lab, half of that also we would have given you. Given it's COVID, we have been very liberal. Okay, so now all you have to do is find the average. Find the total, divide by 8. That is the mark that you've got out of 25 for physics lab. For another 25, you will write an end semester examination. Similarly, chemistry also, 25 for the lab work and 25 for the end semester examination. I think they also have a viva. Okay, so please satisfy yourselves that the marks are correct and everything is okay. Now what I'll do is I'll just give an intro to the next chapter. Can you see?
Yes, ma'am.
Right. So this chapter is, for every chapter in electrostatics, there is a mirror here in magnetism. You know what is this chapter? This chapter is analogous to capacitors. Before capacitors, you had a chapter called electrical properties of material, and there you studied dielectrics specifically. Similarly, here we studied magnetic properties of materials and with more interest on ferromagnetics. So the application of ferromagnetics is an inductor. There, the application of dielectrics is a capacitor. Capacitor is used to store energy in electric field. Inductor is used to store energy in magnetic field. It produces magnetic field and it can store energy in magnetic field. This also requires exactly 2 classes. So please remember, inductors can have different shapes. Different shapes of inductors can be there. The simplest is going to be a solenoid. The simplest is going to be a solenoid. The last 2-3 classes, last 2-3 chapters, we have been seeing that inside a solenoid, there is a uniform magnetic field. Okay, so an inductor is simply a circuit element. That means in any complicated circuit, an inductor is a part of the circuit. It's a circuit element in which the energy can be stored in the magnetic field. So let's say you're passing a current I. Use your right hand rule. You can show that there is a uniform magnetic field in this direction. Now, if the current that you're passing through the inductor is kept a constant, not changing with time, then the magnetic field that you're going to get inside your solenoid is going to be mu naught small n I, where small n is the number of turns per unit length. Or if n is the total number of turns and if L is the length, then small n is capital N by L. This is the case if current is a constant. Now let us see what happens if the current changes with time, or if I becomes a function of time. If I becomes a function of time, that obviously means that B becomes a function of time. Magnetic field becomes a function of time. And this obviously means that magnetic flux becomes a function of time. This is because what is magnetic flux? Magnetic flux is integral B dot dA. Okay, so if B is changing, magnetic flux through these turns is also changing. Okay, and now with this, I want you to quickly go to your Faraday's law. What does Faraday's law say? It says that if you change the magnetic flux, there will be an induced EMF. If you change the magnetic flux, there is something called an induced EMF. So here what is happening is, you have a coil and the coil is itself changing the flux through it. The flux through it is happening because there is a current in the coil. So it has created its own magnetic field. And because the current changed, this own magnetic field changed. And because its own magnetic field changed, its flux also changes. Okay? Now, as a result of the flux change, there will be an EMF produced. Now, this EMF that is produced has a name. It's also called the self-EMF. Self-EMF. It's called self-EMF, or you can call it a self-EMF because it created this change by itself. An EMF has been set up in the coil because the original current changed. Now, if the original current increases with time, the magnetic field increases, okay? The field increases, the flux is increasing. So what happens? There will be an opposite EMF induced or a small amount of opposite current in the coil, so that that induced magnetic field is in the opposite direction. If on the other hand, this current that you're passing is decreasing, the magnetic field that you're having is decreasing, the flux is decreasing. Lenz law doesn't like it. So what it will do is, it will create some additional current, induced current in the same direction, and an additional magnetic field, induced magnetic field in the same direction. So it's all the same. What you studied in Faraday's law is applicable here. Only thing is, it is doing to itself. It is self-correcting. There is a current. The current is changing. It induces an EMF to try to correct that change. Okay, so that's the reason why it's also called a self-EMF. And we are going to start from this point in the next class and then see how you arrive at the expression for the inductance. There you had capacitance. Q is proportional to delta V. Q is equal to CV. Similarly here, you're going to see that L or inductance is also proportionality constant. More about it we'll see in the next class. Okay? So I think you can leave now. I still left you 10 minutes early because I know how your mind will be the minute I start a new chapter. I thought, let me at least spend a few minutes and then leave you. Okay, so you can leave now.